Hello, everyone. Happy Black History Month. Just give me one moment. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I'm going to assume everyone can see that. Great. So, hi, everybody. My name is Wynn Akins. I'm here to share a bit more about our program in African American history at the Library Company, which we call PA. I'm a reference librarian at the Library Company and a subject specialist for our Black history collections. And I help support PA's research and public programming. So, PA's director is Jim Downs, who is a brilliant historian, author, and professor who I'm sure many of you already know if you're regulars at our events and conferences. Jim is the Gilder Lehrman National Endowment for the Humanities Professor of Civil War Era Studies and author of a couple of amazing books such as Sick from Freedom, African American Sickness and Suffering During the Civil War and Reconstruction, and Maladies of Empire, How Colonialism, Slavery, and War Transformed Medicine. So, before Jim and I were here, PA was established in 2007 with the support of the Albert M. Greenfield Foundation and has continued very strong ever since, bringing together fellows, scholars, library company members, community cultural workers, and so many more to explore the depth and breadth of Black life in the Americas. At the heart of this work is the Library Company's Afro-Americana collection, which is one of the most comprehensive archives of printed material by and about people of African descent in the world. The collection began to take shape in the late 1960s in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, and when staff intentionally identified and cataloged materials relating to Black history as a unified body of work. The collection spans an extraordinary range, including early descriptions of pre-modern African societies, the long struggle for justice and emancipation through slavery, war and reconstruction, diasporic migrations, bibliographic innovation, and the cultural renaissance of the early 20th century. It includes books, pamphlets, newspapers, periodicals, broadsides, photos, graphics, you name it, so much more. And in relation to today's program, I also wanted to note that the Library Company holds one of the largest and most diverse collections of early modern Caribbean history and culture. With over 1,200 items and always growing, our collection covers exploration, colonization, slavery, insurrection, and the many modes of colonial backlash in the West Indies, with inherent connections to economic studies, the history of medicine, ethnicity and gender studies, and so much more between 1535 to 1920. So I hope you'll come check it out. On February 19th and 20th, we will be hosting our Black Declarations of Independence Conference, our annual Black History Month conference. It's a free public program with some incredible keynote speakers, such as Nell Irvin Painter, Annette Gordon Reed, and so many more. There is still space left to register, so do that now. I will put a link in the chat in a little bit. And last but not least, applications are open for our Mellon Summer program. So if you know undergraduates or are an undergraduate who is interested to the study of early African American history and looking to pursue a career in history, library science, or museum studies, this program is probably just for you. So I will also drop a link in the chat with more information that you can find on that on our website. And note, applications are due March 18th. So thank you all so much for listening. Please keep in touch online or come visit us in person at the Library Company. And now I will turn it over to Natalie.
Hello. Let me share my screen. Don't forget. Thank you all for coming. Uh, mm, there we go. 1 second. Screen. Okay. Might take a little bit. But yes, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Please let me know if you see my screen. You do. You see it? Good? I can't tell. Someone tell me in the chat. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So this talk is about my book, Haiti and the Revolution Unseen. And this book comes out of my doctoral work. Um, and to be honest, my time as a PhD student, when I reached the point where I decided where you have to write the dissertation, I kind of was stuck until I started reading fiction and history about the Haitian Revolution from Caribbean people outside of Haiti. And when I was reading these texts, I discovered that Haiti wasn't in the text. I'm Haitian American, I was born here. Um, I just felt that there was something missing in how they would talk about the Haitian Revolution. There was clearly they had historicized the revolution well. They had thought about the revolution well. And when I say they, I mean like these seminal figures of 20th century Caribbean literature and Caribbean anti-colonialism. So in my book, I look at C.L.R. James, the Trinidadian. I look at the Cuban writer Alejo Carpentier. I look at Édouard Glissant and Aimé Césaire, both from Martinique. And these are like who's who of 20th century Caribbean writing and anti-colonial thought, right? And I love them, right? How could you not love them? Because when they write about colonialism, they write like with a machete in their hand, like they write to tear down the colonizer. Even someone as halfway timid as Carpentier, who was known to be less political, though I'll give him grace and I say that he is political. Even he wrote, strongly with strong solidarity with Haitians and with all colonized peoples. So this interesting thing happened, or at least that I discovered when I was reading these texts, is that they just had no conception of Haitians, like as their cultural identity, their ways of being in the world, their notions of self, right? And I felt like because they did not understand Haiti and Haitians, that their text about the Haitian Revolution would begin with this kind of fervor for anti colonial resistance, but then taper off and become really defeatist. And I was like, what is happening here? Right? What is happening? Because each one of these giants of Caribbean anti-colonial thought and Caribbean literature turned to the Haitian Revolution to inspire, to politicize, to radicalize. But when you read their text, there's something that's strange that happens. There's almost like this defeatist, this sense that, man, if the Haitians can't get it right, and by get it right, the issue is the rise of dictators. So I began to see that there was a problem with the imagination, with how these particular writers were imagining Haiti and the Haitian Revolution. And part of the problem here is the absence of Africans in their understanding of the Haitian Revolution, or Guineans, right? Or Guinea, as a Haitian would say for Africa, I should say. And this absence of Africa created this incredibly Eurocentric iteration of the Haitian Revolution and of Haitians in texts that were meant to be anti-colonial, anti-Eurocentric, right? So for me, with this book, I look at how these amazing texts ignore Haiti and leave Haiti unseen. And because Haiti's unseen, they cannot actually inspire the kind of radicalization that they try to inspire, right? Um, okay, so let's get into it. Part of the problem for these particular writers is they don't conceive of the Haitian revolutionary as an African, right? This is a huge problem because on the eve of the Haitian Revolution, so the Haitian Revolution is 1791 to 1804. On the eve of the Haitian Revolution, two-thirds of the enslaved population, right? So that's about 500,000 people, were born in Africa, like two-thirds. This is a huge, huge number. And the only reason why Saint Domingue, which is now Haiti, had such a large number of African born captive peoples was because the French never intended for any of their enslaved captives to survive, right? In fact, murder was the norm. right? You're the lifespan of a captive in Saint Domingue who was taken from Africa, maybe 10 to 13 years, right? The idea that the colonizer had was to steal as much labor, steal as much of the captive's labor power, which meant working them to death, right? So there was no way in which the population of Saint Domingue could ever reproduce naturally, right? So if it's the case that two-thirds of the enslaved population were African born, why is there this kind of reluctance in at least Caribbean literature of the Haitian Revolution that deals with anti-colonialism to imagine the Haitian revolutionary as an African, right? I think it's important to imagine the Haitian Revolution as an African, right? Because then that gets us to Haiti and the Haiti that is missing in these classic texts of the Haitian Revolution. And to understand Haiti and Haitians and the Haitian Revolution, as I'm asking you to, you have to begin to think of Boissel resistance. So the French called the African-born enslaved people Boissels, right? It's rather reductive. Right. But the thing about Boissels is even though they're at the very, very bottom of the totem pole in terms of human life in Saint Domingue, they were able to politicize their resistance. And they made it so that the entire enslaved population, those who were born in the Caribbean or born in Saint Domingue, and those who were mixed race, who had radical anti colonial politics and anti slavery politics, would identify with them, which is to say, they had created the condition where anybody who wanted to defeat the French would look to them for guidance. This is huge, right? And the question is, how did they do this, right? So if we look at the eminent Haitian anthropologist, Michel Rotriot, he credits the creation of Creole and Voodoo, right? Because he argues that with Creole, with the Haitian language, they were able to basically imbue their words with not only African linguistics, but with African epistemologies, right? They were able to speak a language that the colonizer also spoke, but ensure that that language maintained the African ethics and African conceptions that they had from various African ethnicities, right? And for Trio, he says that is so key. He says he says Creole is one of the first battles that Haitians successfully won against the colonizer. And the second battle that they won is voodoo, he argues, right? He argues that if Creole was able to maintain African epistemologies and African ethics into the language, like weave that into the foundation of the language, voodoo was able to take Catholicism, right, and make Catholicism speak to African identity and African ethics, right? So what he's trying to get at is the creative power of the Africans who became Haitians, right? Jean Fouchard and Crystal Edens, they say yes, Creole and Voodoo are huge in this, but they also credit self-pride. They say the Africans who became Haitians love themselves. And no matter what the French said about them, they held themselves with high regard. And what allowed them to do that is Maroonage, right? Being a Maroon. There was these huge Maroon communities in Haiti before the Haitian Revolution. And by Maroon communities, I mean collectives of runaway captive peoples, right? Edens in particular notes the importance of rituals, right? Which is not necessarily voodoo per se, but the kind of practices that people that create behaviors that allow them to be firm in their pride in themselves, right? So it's the fact that they created ways of being and they ritualized them so that they could maintain love of themselves and maintain a clear sense of themselves, even though they were dealing with immense violence, right? So Jean Casimir, he's a sociologist, a decolonial sociologist. He in turn credits the birth of the counterplantation system, right? That's his term, right? And he's basically referencing these Haitian cultural institutions that were created by Boissels, right? African captives, like the Laku, which is a communal yard, that essentially created the context where these rituals, Creole and voodoo, could become the main epistemological foundation for how Haitian people envisioned existence, right? So what they are all getting at is the Africans were able to not only get the enslaved that were born in the Americas, or even some that were mixed race to identify with them, but they were able to quite literally create a whole complex of thought, right? They were essentially able to create this oppositional cultural framework, right? So this framework was so powerful on the eve of the Haitian Revolution that the famous French colonist Maurice de Saint Mary, he was actually well, technically, what would we say, an octroon by French Caribbean standards. By American standards, he was black, but he was hiding from it. Um, he writes in his famous chronicle of Saint Domingue that Saint Domingue had the problem of Africans difficult to contain, right? um, the amount of violence that was needed to stop African resistance in San Domingo and throughout the Americas is so minimized. I think in how we conceive of slavery in the present moment. But when Maurice de Saint Mary says that Saint Domingue had the problem of Africans difficult to contain, he is basically telling his readers that violence wasn't enough, right? The violence that they had to inflict could not break their spirits, right? And because of this, right, it's not simply that the African descendant who looked phenotypically unmixed identified with the Africans, but also the mixed race. So, unlike the United States, I like to tell my students that the French way of colonizing is the English and American way of colonizing is to say, you could never be me. So, of course, there would be the one drop rule in the United States. And of course, in the UK, there would be this like very strict understanding of whiteness. But for the French, they were assimilationists. So they were like, why wouldn't you want to be me? Right. You know, this kind of like egocentrism. I always say the French are a little egocentric with their mode of colonization and enslavement. And because they had this kind of assimilationist idea, they created a whole class of people that we don't see in the American, and even you could argue you don't see in the English variant of colonization and slavery, even though mixed race people exist, but they don't become a separate class like they do in the French colonial context. And the separate class of people, the gens de couleur, or free people of color, um, there were a significant number that were also radicalized by the Africans. One of them is Jean-Louis Bastille, who writes in his 1816 book, and this is after the Haitian Revolution ends, and he's a political operative. He's a political scribe of Henri Christophe. He's working on behalf of the government, and he's writing these. On the one hand, it is propaganda, right? Right, to say how amazing Henri Christophe is. He was amazing, but kind of not, and there's some dictatorship happening there. But he's writing this propaganda to show that Christophe is amazing, but he's also writing these firmly these really radical anti-colonial texts that anticipate what we see in the 20th century and the 21st century that comes out of the Caribbean and Africa, right? He writes really famously The Colonial System Unveiled, which you should read. But anyway, he says, having been given life by an African woman, I very much identify with being African. Mind you, this man is white-skinned. His mother is a octroon or maybe quadroon. She's a free woman of color. His father is a French colonist. Nobody is African here, right? But in order for him to articulate his resistance to the colonial project, he identifies with Africans, right? So this is to say that what Boissels achieved in Saint-Domingue on the eve of the Haitian Revolution is to say that if you're going to go against the French, if you're going to go against slavery and colonialism, you have to now know yourself outside of the French and say that you're African, right? So this leads to, in the 20th century, actually in the 19th, 20th, even 21st century, this is the reason why contemporary Haitians will call themselves Guineans, right? They will say Haiti Guinea, right? So Africa Haiti, right? And this is all because of this firmly this immense influence of Africans, right? At the start of the revolution and at the start of during well the foundation of Saint Domingue. Now, what's really, really important about this is kind of, for me at least, is getting the reader to understand how their oppositional cultural framework happened. Like, how did they make it a practice? And how they made it a practice is through resistant questioning, right? So they were able to create this resistant consciousness, and you can kind of get it in contemporary patterns of Haitian speech. So, in Creole, you can express like I don't want to say confusion, but like shocked confusion with and say kisa. You can say what, or you can say sablandi. What did the white say, right? And I love this phrase, right? I love this phrase because it shows you that what Boissels bequeathed to their contemporary descendants is this critical skepticism of anything that the white man had to say, anything that the French colonizer had to say, right? So to say, what did the whites say? Sablandi is to say, like I guess in the contemporary, I shouldn't say that. I won't say that. Um, but it's to show that how they were thinking wasn't simply just to accept their colonization and their enslavement, which is say they refused to accept the terms and the conditions the French offered to them, that said that you were justly enslavable because you have black skin. You are justly you are justly seen as not human because of XYZ, right? They said sablandi, right? So there's this refusal to identify with with the enslaver and the colonizer. And for me, what's really important is that this refusal is what creates solidarity. So it's not race. Like when we think about how when we think of the Haitian Revolution and when we think of Black resistance in the early American moment, or African resistance in the early American moment, we think about it in terms of, oh, they're Black and they're coming together. But in this moment, when a good number of people are African born, they don't know themselves, they don't see themselves as Black, right? They don't identify and articulate their resistance through the terms and conditions of the colonizer, which is to say, they're not going to use race, or what Sylvia Wynter calls biocentrism, right? To bring themselves together. They are going to use the fact that they need to come together, right, to fight the colonizer. So when I think about the kind of resistant mentality that Boissels gave to contemporary Haitians and that kind of resistant mentality that bore the Haitian Revolution, it is a mentality that counters what you see in 20th century Caribbean anti-colonialism, which does not view refusal in this way, right? So in my book, I write that Hegel, you guys know Hegel, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Hegel was the bane of my existence in grad school, in large part because when I read the Master Slave, Master Bondage, you know what I'm talking about, that famous text where Hegel says that the master knows himself through the slave and the slave through the master. It just didn't feel right. Like it just didn't feel right. How could the enslaved person know themselves through their master? It just felt like something very much that an enslaver would want. Anyway, so Hegel famously said that the master knows himself through the slave and the slave through the master. And a body of anti-colonial thought has agreed. I argue that the Guinean says, I see that you need me to be you, but I do not need you to be me. To the master demanding recognition, to the apologist writing to support the master's demand for recognition, and to the anti-colonial radical whose rebellion necessitates recognizing the master's request for recognition, the Guinean says, Sablandi, right? She reflects, she refuses, and she keeps it moving, right? So this is really important. But if you pick up any of the classics, of any of these classics of the Haitian Revolution written out by Caribbean writers outside of Haiti, like C.L.R James, Carpentier, Césaire, Glissant, among others, you will not meet this type of revolutionary, which is to say, you will not meet an African, and instead you will meet a mad Haitian rebel, right? So this is a phrase that I get from Derek Walcott's pageant, Drums and Colors. And Derek Walcott was a St. Lucian famous poet playwright, and he writes this pageant. I should give you some context. So this pageant was written for the West Indian Federation, and that federation came together in the wake as a way to bring as a kind of way to I don't want to say in the wake of, well, the pageant, the federation comes about precisely in the moment of Caribbean anti-colonial contestation, and English-speaking countries, West Indian country, Caribbean nations, are moving away from England, right, or the UK, or England, really, right. And in doing so, there was a federation formed with several key nations, where they so that they could create themselves as like this political bloc against the colonizers, really the United States, but we can get into that later. Right. So when Walcott writes this, he's commissioned to write this. Right. He's commissioned to write this pageant that is trying to get the Caribbean nationals or the Caribbean people of the specific territories that are in the West Indian Federation to be excited about being in a West Indian Federation. Now, they were not excited about being a part of the West Indian Federation because they didn't see themselves as Caribbean people, like as united people, right? Right now we're in a moment when I teach Caribbean studies, my students will say Caribbeans, like, they don't even say Caribbean people, they just say Caribbeans. I'm like, what does that mean? But anyway, but that idea comes about because they actually believe that the region is a collective. Well, during the West Indian Federation, that wasn't a belief, right? That wasn't an idea that was held. So the pageant itself gives us key scenes or key moments in the region's history, right? And one of the moments is the Haitian Revolution. So what the pageant does very, very well is to show us that if we're going to know ourselves as a region, in which we must know ourselves as a region to fight against Europe that knows itself as a region, and to fight against the United States, which knows itself as part of the West, as legitimately a part of the West. Like if you're at the bottom end of the West because you're racialized, you're not legitimately a part of the West. If we're going to know ourselves, then we must know our history. So that's what the pageant tries to do, right? But also because Walcott being Walcott, because he's like amazing, right? And he's critical. He's like, I'm also going to give you a critique of the people that are at the helm of the West Indian Federation, the brown middle class, right? The individuals that are so invested in having a seat at the table that they will betray the revolution or social justice movement. But anyway, in the play, this is the quote that a multicolored maroon, that's the language, says to a potential black maroon who's trying to join the maroon band. And the black maroon does not want a white maroon who's a planter. He's not a maroon, he's a white planter who's destitute and he needs to join a group. And the multicolored maroon Mano says, we need to all get along together. We're all part of a new Caribbean. Mind you, I should let you know that this maroon band, you have an East Indian maroon, you have a Chinese maroon, you have Mano who's multicolored, not an African in sight, but I digress. He says, "Oh God, but it's hard sometimes to love one another. If you get on like a beast, bind him hand and foot. I can't have no rumption in this place. He getting on like some mad Haitian rebel, right? So he wants to bind the black would-be maroon because the black would-be maroon refuses to think or to accept that this white planter can be absolved of all of his crimes and suddenly join the maroon band, right? But Mano says he's acting like a mad Haitian rebel in this instance, which is to say he's acting crazy because he wants vengeance, right? And for Walcott, the Haitian rebel is somebody who's invested in vengeance. And he's invested in vengeance in large part because he wants to replicate the colonizer. And I'll get into that a bit more. But what's really important here is that for Walcott, right, he can only conceive of the Haitian rebel as somebody who is not African and somebody who wants to replicate the colonizer, which is to say, when you get to the heart of how Caribbean writers in the 20th century conceive of the Haitian Revolutionary, they think about them through the lens of the affranchis, right? Through a particular class in Saint Domingue. So during the Haitian Revolution or during in Saint Domingue, you had the enslaved captive population and you had a free population. So your Franchi class, you have a class of free peoples who were liberated before the onset of the revolution, right? And this class is composed of wealthy slave-owning planters, impoverished skilled laborers who included emancipated Africans, emancipated or born free Black Creoles, and emancipated or born free mixed race Creoles. The majority in this class, which numbered about 27,000 and nearly equaled the white population, were mixed race and Caribbean born, right? So the racially mixed population is known as gens de couleur, free people of color. And they held the highest class position among the emancipated class, right? And they held this position because they were generationally free, right? They and their forebears had never experienced slavery, and a good number of them were wealthy, right? Let me see. So the individuals that most people, when they think of the Haitian Revolution, and all the writers that I treat, when they conceive of the Haitian Revolution, they think about these particular generals. So a Creole general, Toussaint, who was free before the revolution, Henri Christophe, who was free before the revolution, Alexander Pétion, who was free and agent de couleur, so generationally free. So they are part of a class of people who, if they survive the Haitian Revolution, right, they would constitute Haiti's first political elite, right? And this elite would also include, so you have the Haiti's first political elite is predominantly peoples with affranchis. The others that constitute this group include the powerful former captive Black officers from the indigenous or revolutionary army. So someone like Jean-Jacques Dessalines, right? So there were a handful, there was a number of Black officers who became generals who had been enslaved. And if they survive after the end of the revolution, they become part of the elite, right? This is really, really important because for these writers of Caribbean classics of the Haitian Revolution, they assume that these Black officers like Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who become part of the elite, are creolized in the same manner as these affranchi generals. And by creolized, I mean that for the affranchi, in order for you to, there were conditions attached to your freedom, right? All emancipated individuals, whether it's generationally or whether it was recently, they had to serve in the militia. They also had to serve as the colony's police, which is to say, in order for them to be free, they had to police the behavior of the captive population. That was the only reason why the colony had a police force, right? Which was to track down maroons, right? So in order for you to be free, you have to accept and support the subjugation of other captives, right? So this creates this complex and this dilemma, particularly for the gens de couleur who identified with the French. Casimir and Trio and others argue that those that were predominantly, that were visibly Black or more phenotypically like unmixed looking, they were less likely to identify with the French. Look, I don't know if that's the case, but the class on the whole of the affranchi required identification with the French. It required that you become indoctrinated to French culture and to the colonial system. So as soon as you become a part of the class, you have to support how the colony operates, which becomes a huge problem after the revolution because that class mentality doesn't go away, right? And because it doesn't go away, you have these Haitian revolutionary texts from Walcott, from Césaire, who write the Haitian Revolution through the lens of post-revolutionary Haiti or early Haiti, where the Haitian revolutionary, when they become a political leader, they are tyrants. They are tyrants. And they critique the Haitian revolutionary who becomes the tyrant because they are invested in vengeance. So when in Drums and Colors, when Walcott has his Maroon leader, Mano, issue this quote about the mad Haitian rebel, he also has him say, sometimes the time's so bad a man don't have time to think properly. So for Mano, in the pageant, he is suggesting that the planter who is going to join the Maroon band didn't have time to think properly about his actions. And the former enslaved person didn't have time to think about their actions, right? And whereas there can be grace for the white planter, the would-be Haitian revolutionary is chastised rather harshly. And he's chastised rather harshly because in the pageant, in the Haitian revolutionary section, the section on the Haitian Revolution, you have this scene where Christophe and Dessalines are talking to each other. And Dessalines says, "Oh, now it's time for what does he say? It's so like it's so cliche." He says, and I'm gonna read it because I think it's important that I get the quote right. He says, "Oh, it's time for the black man's time to kill." Right. So, what does it mean that the Haitian revolutionary? Oh yeah, he says, Christophe and Dessalines are talking, and they await the start of a new age, the black man's turn to kill. So, what does it mean that in this Haitian revolutionary text, and mind you, Derek Walcott is actually a really interesting figure because he like writes about the Haitian Revolution for like 40 years. He writes so many plays about the Haitian Revolution. I feel like each one he gets it wrong, but that's just me. But I'm just like, bro, stop writing about it. But he can't stop writing about it badly, wrongly. I shouldn't say that. I'm gonna be honest, badly and wrongly. Um, but he has in each one of these texts, he has this idea of Christophe and Dessalines and all of these figures as having no other cultural antecedent, no other cultural figure of power and of authority, which is to say, in Walcott's imagining of the Haitian Revolution, the African doesn't exist. So even when he describes who a Maroon is, I know it's because of the West Indian Federation, but there's this curious way that when he conceives of the Caribbean, the African does not exist. But with Haiti, there's no way you can conceive of the Haitian Revolution without Africans. And there's no way you can conceive of early 19th century Haiti without Africans because 80% of the population is African born, right? But that's like that's completely missing. Okay? So what I try to get at, and I look at Aimé Césaire's The Tragedy of King Christophe, Carpentier's The Kingdom of this World, and the play Monsieur Toussaint by Édouard Glissant, and also the history by C.L.R. James, is what I try to get at with this book is how these particular figures create this kind of weird, there's this weird conservatism that enters into the narrative, right? And the conservatism rests largely because they can only imagine the Haitian Revolution as a Creole, right? And I invite readers to imagine the Haitian Revolution as a Guinean. And I think it's imperative that they do, because once they do, they can acknowledge the way that the captive of San Domingo quite literally created a new world in Haiti, right? They created a new conditions for how they were to live in the colony and the Americas, right? So I invite them to look at them as inventors and not just of a world like in Haiti itself, but also of thought, right? So there's this really important moment let me see how much time I have. Um, there's this really important moment in Monsieur Toussaint by Édouard Glissant, where he has this, she's showcasing Toussaint L'Ouverture. So in Monsieur Toussaint, really good play. I actually enjoy that one a lot. Glissant has Toussaint essentially, sorry, my son is acting up. He's screaming. He has Monsieur Toussaint, he has Toussaint like he's facing death. He's about to die in his cell in the mountains of France, and he's essentially being reprimanded by ghosts. And these ghosts are, they're both ghosts and they're mirages of people. So some of them are alive in San Domingue fighting for the revolution. Others are just simply ghosts, right? And so there's this particular moment when, let me read it so you can get what I'm trying to get at here. There's this particular moment where one of the pre-Haitian revolutionary figures, Macandal, is talking to lovingly to Toussaint, and he says, "You were not yet born, but how we felt your kindness at your shoulder, where the heavy hole leaves its mark." Right. So Glissant wants his readers to recognize that for the people around him, they for the enslaved people around Toussaint, they conceived him as an African like them, as being aware of the kind of cultural context where you can the future you, or like a child can come to visit, and like in a dream, or an ancestor can come and visit. Like there's this sense that Toussaint was a part of them, right? But mind you, Toussaint in this particular play is all about liberty, equality, fraternity. He is a strict Republican, and I mean Republican not in that current sense, but I mean that in French Revolutionary Republicanism. He's so consumed with the logic of the French Revolution that he says at one point there is no Ogu, meaning there is no Ogu is both a voodoo demigod and an African ancestor, right? There's just like science in the written word, right? So he says, yeah, he says there's no Legba, there's no Ogu, right? So for Glissant, he wants his readers to see that even though Toussaint is writing is this his Toussaint is trying to live apart. He's more Europeanized, he's creolized, he's not trying to take part in these African cultural ways. The people around him still treat him in community as if he's African, right? But this is a problem, right? This is a problem because, right, both Makandal and all the other ghosts that come and haunt Toussaint are all haunting him lovingly. They're very deferential. They're trying to help him through. In the Haitian Revolution, the captives did not do this to Toussaint. When Toussaint acted up, and he suddenly was following the way of the colonizer, they turned their back on him, which is to say they held him accountable, as we would say in this particular moment. There was no need to be deferential. What I'm inviting readers to recognize is that if you keep the Creole figure of the Haitian revolutionary as the center of how you conceive of the Haitian Revolution, all of your Haitian revolutionary characters will be deferential. They will be obedient to colonial power. And they will be obedient in the sense that they would be like, oh, Toussaint, help save us, save us. Oh no, we're going to be slaves forever. That is not very Haitian, right? Or they will be, we are tyrants, we are bloodthirsty. War, war, I want to be, I want money, I want blood. It makes no sense, right? But that kind of figuration is only possible without the African being present, right? Without us having a conception of who the African is to the Haitian Revolution and to Haiti proper. And what I show in my book um, is the importance of thinking with the African, right? Because when you think with the African, it allows you to be conceptually disobedient. And when you begin to be conceptually disobedient, you then are no longer beholden to your denigration as a person of color. You are no longer beholden to feeling resigned to the conditions of the world, right? You know that the world can be remade, right? And that is a lesson of the Haitian Revolution, quite frankly, right? That our world is always able to be remade, right? If the captives of Saint Domingue didn't think that they could remake their world, then they would still be enchained, right? And people like to say, "Oh, Haiti's not right," but Haiti's not right because of manufactured for other reasons. It has nothing to do with the revolution. Well, it has nothing to do with the revolutionaries, right? But what I want to stress is the critical disobedience that begins the books, that is the idea for these works, but then that disappears in the writing of these works, largely because of the Creole figure of the Haitian Revolution, and largely because they keep insisting on imagining the Haitian Revolution as this Western European phenomenon. And you see this through their investment in French revolutionary republicanism and in their refusal to conceive of the African as somebody of political power and somebody of political influence, like knowledge wise and action wise. I think that's it. 'Cause I know I had to stop at, right? I had to stop right now. Let me close this. Stop sharing.
Okay.
Okay. Did I do it right?
You did. That was an excellent lecture. Thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
went and got my coffee, which your publisher, sent last week while you're speaking, was checking everything out. But yeah, thank you so much. It is an incredible introduction for me personally, to your book, and I can't wait to delve in more. I am just gonna check and see if we have any questions already in the Q&A, which I don't think we do at the moment. So folks who are with us, thank you so much for sticking around. And yeah, go ahead and pop those questions in the chat. We actually just got one in from Kavita Singh. And Kavita says, "This is so exciting, and I've learned so much. I want to ask if there are alternative works of fiction that you would recommend for a more Ginen understanding of the revolution."
Yeah. So in my book, I conclude with Edward Dantica's collection of short stories because Dantica is a really interesting. She's Haitian, right? But she writes in English. She writes with full awareness of how other Caribbean writers conceive of Haitians, and all of her Haitian revolutionary works respond to those texts. And in the response to it, she's always playfully questioning how they misread how Haitians understand themselves and how they know themselves. Um, in large part for the French speaking Caribbean, so Martinique and Guadeloupe, there's this way of there's a way in which they see themselves as French, which in the Haitian context is different. You get that from like this the elite. I can't call them elite, like the people that descended from the affranchis, right? But the 80% did not see themselves like that. But there's this. So you see it more, I would argue, from someone like Danticat. Yeah.
Thank you. While we're waiting for other questions to roll in, um, I am wondering, in your reframing and centering of African Haitians of Guinea, what political possibilities do you see, yeah, revealed for Haiti's, current political situation, or just this very trying moment that we're all living through, and that
Yeah.
is historically ongoing, obviously, but obviously there's a lot going on right now.
I mean, for Haiti right now, um, interestingly enough, when you think about Haiti right now, that is the direct result of the 1915 U.S. occupation of Haiti. So when the U.S. occupied Haiti in 1915, from 1915 to 1934, they effectively break the mechanisms that the predominantly poor class of Haitians had used to keep the elites in check. So let me give you a little context. After the Haitian Revolution, there's a scramble by the Affranchis who have in power. When they after Dessalines is the only one of the Affranchis of the political generals who actually tried. I should say, who actually gave a damn. It sounds really bad, but he actually gave a damn. So he tried to democratize the land. He thought about the Africans. Most of the other ones didn't. They didn't, and um, what they end up trying to do is through their laws is to force the people back onto the plantation. But this is a new political moment, which is to say, none of them had the military strength to force the people back onto the plantation. The only individual that did was Dessalines, who was murdered, and then Henri Christophe, right? And this is why Henri Christophe's castle or his reign is economically successful because he had the military power to force the people to do horrible work, like hard labor. Pétion, the Republicans that come after the French, who were, and I say Republicans in the French Revolutionary tradition because they call themselves Republicans, never had the political power. So what ends up happening in Haiti, people start taking land, right? And they take land, and even though they're told, "Oh, you're a cultivator, you can't do X, Y, Z," they don't listen. So this is like the best politics of refusal. Like it's literally, you're telling me I can't do this, I'm not going to listen. And by the time we get to the start of the 20th century, Haiti has the second highest standard of living. What changes this is the first US occupation of Haiti. When the US come and occupy Haiti, now they have they basically give the Haitian elite the military power to break the people. So this is when we have the rise of the Cacos resistance, right? Which was quite successful up to a point, right? But they have a never-ending supply of weaponry from the United States and military, right? And that essentially stops the forward progressive movement or the democratization and the economic equality that Haiti had at the start of the 20th century. So if Haiti can get better, stop the United States. Isn't that crazy? But that's the issue. Literally, it's the issue because the people are they take care of it themselves.
Thank you. We all need the history lesson. I need the history lesson.
That's okay. It's
Um,
okay.
but beautiful to hear that. Um, I am wondering if there's any other questions from our audience. I see you guys in here. We have 11 of you. Don't be shy. Um, so while we're waiting for another question from the audience, yeah, another question I had was just your sort of your bibliography, your bibliographic research, and given the decentering, and these misreadings, how you found this African presence, in yeah, in your research, and to do this work. What archives did you work with, or just different types of archiving, deconstructing the archive, what that means of just like the personal stories, I'm sure, and familiar
Yeah.
connections.
Yeah, so there were the personal stories, the familial connections, folklore. Like, what's a wonderful archive is voodoo. I mean, it's just the songs. The songs carry everything. Like it's an oral. It's just the entire history. So there's that, but then um, there's also the work of Jean Casimir. So Jean Casimir gave me the license and the courage to say this. Um, because there's a way in which when you're a Haitian scholar and you're working on Haiti, you don't want to offend the elders. You don't want them to be upset about because Haitian people are very protective of Haiti because Haiti is demonized, and the bad press is real. So when you offer a critique, like so, I'm critiquing the Caribbean writers of the Haitian Revolution, but I'm also critiquing the Haitian revolutionary generals who are in Haiti. They're openly critiqued, right? Outside of Haiti, they're not at all critiqued in that same way. So there's a reticence to critique them outside of Haiti because of how Haitians are perceived and treated, right? And there's also I don't know, I just didn't feel like because I'm Haitian American, I didn't feel like I should say these things. Like I didn't feel like I was legitimately, I should give you context. Haitians consider if you were born outside of Haiti, they're like, "Aw, you Haitian, you're part of the diaspora." They look at you like you're less than. So I didn't feel confident enough. But when I read Jean Casimir's The Haitians, which is both a history and a sociological study, he essentially um, gave me the license to use the folklore, to use voodoo, to look at the laws like the penal codes. Look at how they were, what they were saying, and then versus the reality of they're impossible. They were impossible to be. They could never come into effect. They were just like, yeah, you're a cultivator now. And the people were like, okay, right? They had no power. There was no bite to them. But if you were to read all the laws, the Haitian laws in the 19th century and the 20th century, this is like tyranny. But the reality is not the same, like on the ground, right? So that helped a lot.
Absolutely. Oh, we have a hand raised. Um, this is a comment from Paul. I'm sorry, Paul, if I mispronounce your name, Paul Croce. Thanks for a wonderful presentation. In particular, your point about impoverishment with U.S. occupation should get more attention. You'd be in a good position to write an op-ed on this. Um, and yeah, I guess that's another question that opens up the question too of what's next for you in your work on this.
Oh, op-eds are hard. You know, that you have to write so succinctly. Like you have to write like academics can be really verbose. Like we're a little wordy. So the succinct journalistic pieces, I can't do. But what's next for me in terms of well, it's not related to Haiti. Some magical realism, which it actually is related to Haiti. It is related to Haiti. But yeah, that's what's next for me.
Absolutely. I was reflecting on our Obia collections at the library
Mm,
company, and the way that spiritual practice was used for resistance in very similar ways, in a lot of regions, but especially the British
yeah.
Caribbean. But I think there's so much there that's rich to go into this magical realism space.
Hmm.
So I can't wait to read
Yes.
that from you.
Yes. I mean, because if you're going to create a new world, you have to believe in magic too. I'm always
100%.
like, I don't know why people don't want to admit that politics is magic. Magical thinking. It's like, that's why fantasy fiction is great to think about with politics. That's why I tell my
Yeah.
students, they think I'm crazy.
Not crazy at all. It's literally they're creating rituals that then the
Yes.
whole masses of everyone doing.
Yes.
But
It's magic.
absolutely. Oh, and one more. Well, a
Mhm.
comment, which you can see. I won't read it out, but
Okay.
Paul supports you, and would love to be to keep in touch. Um, so I think we are almost at time. So I'm going to cap it there. I'll ask you if you would like to say anything to our audience for folks to keep in touch or stay up to date on your work.
Oh, you can follow me on Instagram, right? My where's my handle? I'm so bad at this. I'm analog. I just like made my stuff public. I don't know how to do this.
Great.
Instagram, or you can see I have a webpage. I have a website. I just got that. I'm also analog.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can see my website. Let me see. Do I can I? You can catch my website or my email. Um, so my first and last name at not Gmail at temple.edu.
Excellent.
Yes.
And also, I'm sure you've already heard, but the library company will be joining the Temple
Yeah, I know. I was
constellation of libraries.
excited.
Yeah. So there's
I
so
was like,
much more
wow.
coming.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Would love to have you and your students in the library and continue these talks. So thank you so much for your work and your time tonight. Thank you very much to our audience as well. And yeah, everyone have a good night.